Want to hear something wild about the dismissive avoidant? They don't really get their needs met within a relationship, and yet it seems like they're the only ones getting their needs met in a relationship. Let's unpack that. Leslie Wells, connection coach here. I help individuals work on earning secure attachment so they can show up better for themselves, not abandon their own needs, and so that they can show up better for their partner to change their relationship dynamics. Attachment style is one of the biggest predictors of how you're going to show up in relationships. So if you want to change the dynamic of your relationships and any negative cycles you are in, look at things through an attachment lens. So dismissive avoidants learned early in childhood that there was not anyone that was going to be present and available to show up to meet their emotional needs. So they may have had parents that maybe they didn't have a really bad home life. Their parents showed up physically and met their physical needs, and maybe even took them to their after school activities, took them to sporting events, celebrated accomplishments, celebrated their wins when they had good grades, when they had good things that they won for sporting events, but they didn't pick up on emotional cues or those bids for connection. So they weren't nurturing, they had no emotional intelligence, they did not connect with their child in that way. And so they grew up whenever they had feelings or emotions or problems that they were dealing with internally, they learned to deal with them on their own. And they learned that because they could not get their needs met, they feel defective and broken. Like, I know that I have these needs, but I'm not able to get them met, so there's something wrong with me inherently. If you're not sure about the dismissive avoidant, go back and look at some of my other TikToks because there's a rabbit hole and you've got a lot to catch up with. So what happens when the dismissive avoidant grows up and take those inner wounds and those inner fears and those inner experiences and beliefs about themselves into an adult relationship is they are not able to tap into their emotions. Usually they cannot even tap into the physical sensations that happen within their body that will then prompt an emotion when paired with a thought. And so inside of a relationship, it is very difficult for them to even know what their needs are. They usually cannot express them to their partner. A, that requires vulnerability. B, that requires you to be able to check in with yourself and know your feelings and your emotions. They're usually not able to do that. So they cannot process, verbalize, express, feel, or identify their own needs. So if you don't know what your needs are and you can't express them to your partner, how in the world are you going to get those needs met? Typically, when they do have an emotional need, and emotions and feelings are super important because they are indicators that there's a need that is going unmet or something that needs to be explored. And maybe their feelings are not quite right, but it still tells us that there's something going on that we need to examine. So without being able to acknowledge your emotions or your needs, you typically don't know what your needs are. And so you can't get them met. So for the dismissive avoidant, that looks like distraction to avoid whatever it is that's going unmet. And that can be throwing themselves into a hobby, into a substance abuse, an affair, validation. It could be throwing themselves into work. A lot of times they're overworkers or overachievers. But whatever it is, they're avoiding actually figuring out what the need is and then how to get that need met and how to deal with the emotions that are centered around that thing. The need that they think they need are usually needs like peace and harmony and lots of space and autonomy and not being enmeshed in a relationship. In reality, we have needs, all of us as humans, for connection, to be known and to be accepted as we are, to have intimacy and be able to be transparent and have vulnerability and be able to feel safe with someone and sharing and knowing that we can trust that person. Our true need that most people have is that when the world hits us with bad things, we need to know that we've got somebody else in it with us. And so the biggest way for people to heal is in relationships where it's a good, safe relationship where someone has your back and you know that if you have to face something bad, it's not as bad because you've got someone in it with you. But the dismissive avoidant has convinced themselves that those are not the things that they need, that they just need to be alone, that relationships are bad, that people are not safe, that they're not going to accept them, that they're going to be rejected because they're inherently broken. So back to needs. They also are really terrible about meeting the needs of their partner because dismissive avoidants, because of the things that are important to them or that they think they want, they typically are not good at meeting their partner's needs for any expectations. They cannot take feedback. They take that as criticism. And so they can't do things to improve the relationship because they can't hear their partner out and work on those things and look at those things and meet those needs. Typically, if a partner brings them needs, they have a spirit of rebellion and they will sort of plant their feet and refuse to do those things. Part of that is because subconsciously they think they're going to fail. And the other part of that is because they're so afraid of losing their identity within the relationship that they feel like that's control and they will shut down to that very quickly. So that makes them unable to meet needs. Because they're unable to show up with vulnerability and hold space for their partner's feelings and emotions, they can't meet those needs either. They do not do well with conflict. They can't navigate that, and they don't do good with commitment. So as you can see, they really can't show up in the ways that you need to have a real, true relationship. And so their partner's needs typically go unmet. Their partners typically feel breadcrumbed, deprioritized. A lot of their free time is not spent with their partner. It's spent with their own hobbies, their own friendships. And so they really sort of feel like they're way down on that list of priorities for the dismissive avoidant. So they do not meet their own needs because they don't know what they are, and they don't meet the needs of their partner. But ironically, they seem to be the only ones getting their needs met in the relationship because they dictate the relationship. Because of their tendency to shut down, withdraw, and disassociate when things do not feel good to them, they determine all the things in the relationship. They determine when you're going to have intimacy, the level of intimacy, how far it's going to go before they shut down. They determine when there's actually going to be conflict resolved because they determine when they're going to check out and when that's going to be brushed under the rug and whether or not they're going to show back up to actually resolve the conflict. They determine how much time you're going to spend together and when you are, and whether or not they're even going to make that space based on the things that they would rather be doing because they don't want to spend too much time with you and lose themselves in the relationship. So it appears very much on the surface that the dismissive avoidant is sort of the only one that's getting their needs met in a relationship. But I think it's important to understand that they're really not even getting their needs met. And that's really sad both for the partner and for the dismissive avoidant. So if you feel like it's unfair and your needs aren't getting met, that is a fair assessment and that is true. And you have to decide what boundaries you're going to put in place and how much of that you're going to tolerate. But I think it is important to at least have compassion that the person that is not meeting your needs is also not really getting their own needs met. And that's something for the dismissive avoidant to think about.